evening and welcome to the Ombudsman's program. My name is Diane Welborn. I am the Ombudsman and I'm going to be your host for this evening's program. This evening's program is a call-in show, so we invite viewers that have questions or comments to join the conversation that we're going to have during this next hour. Tonight our topic is DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. I am joined tonight by two guests who are going to help educate me and the viewers about DACA and what it means and what's happening to it right now and what possibilities are for the future. I'm joined by Kathleen Kersh. Thanks for coming tonight, who is an attorney with Advocates for Basic Legal Equality. So thank you again. Glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm also joined by Spatino-Garias, who is a student at Wright State University. So thank you for taking time away from your books and your studies to come join us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Great, thank you. The Trump administration plans to wind down the government program that protects young undocumented immigrants from deportation. This was announced by Attorney General Jeff Sessions on Tuesday, September the 5th. The end of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA, initiative is certain to be intensely debated across our country. The goal of our program this evening is to educate our viewers about the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, how it was created, who does it impact, and what are options for the future. As I said before, this is a call-in program, and so we welcome your participation in the program. So now I think we'll just get started by asking, what exactly is DACA, and when and how was it created?
Sure. DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, is a program that was created through executive action. It was announced by President Obama on June 15th of 2012. So it was not a law, and that becomes really important in the debate about it. And basically what it was is, as the executive of Homeland Security, which is the agency that houses all of our immigration sub-agencies, President Obama told all of the immigration agencies they were to exercise prosecutorial discretion. So to grant what we call deferred action or relief from deportation for 2 years for a certain subgroup of people who were brought here to the United States without permission or overstayed a visa, but were brought here as children.
Okay, that helps us. Let's talk about why the DACA participants are called dreamers. I think that's probably more common in the news media than to hear about actually about DACA. So tell our viewers a little bit about what happened to the DREAM Act in Congress, and then why now has that led to calling the young people dreamers.
Sure, well, feel free to chime in if you want, Stephanie. But
sure.
When we talk about dreamers, we're talking about people who came to the United States as young children, who, for all intents and purposes, are Americans. They speak English, they have been educated in our schools, and so their dream is to really live and work and have their families in the United States, just like so many children who were born here. The DREAM Act started, actually, it's a bill that's been introduced many times, and the first time it was really introduced was in 2001 by Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois. It was subsequently introduced in 2006, 7, 2009/2010, and then again in 2011, and actually there's a version of it pending now.
Okay.
And so it's designed to grant these people who, as I mentioned, for all intents and purposes, live here as Americans, the ability to stay here and not be scared of deportation.
Okay, all right, and so that's a very good beginning for this. Let's talk a little bit about the announcement. I found it was interesting doing the research for this program that it was announced on an anniversary date of a previous Supreme Court decision. Why don't you give us a little history of that, okay?
All right, sure. The original announcement, you mean?
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
So it was announced on the anniversary of Plyler v. Doe, which is a historic Supreme Court decision that basically said schools cannot discriminate against undocumented children, cannot deny them the ability to attend public school because of their immigration status. And that really ties into one of the major benefits of DACA, which means that has meant that many people who have applied for deferred action under the DACA program and received it are able to go to school and pay in-state tuitions in many states. And they're able to get educated. They've joined many of them are employed. They contribute widely to our economy because of their level of education.
Right, right. And so that freedom of access to education, this suit that you're talking about was brought by one state or one or more states at the time. Is that correct? And then it ended up in the Supreme Court, and it was not really decided. It was just left, wasn't it?
Plyler v. Doe.
Yeah,
It was decided at the Supreme Court,
okay,
right? And so it granted undocumented children the ability to attend public schools.
Right,
basically.
that's good. And then on into higher education as well in the states, right?
Well, not necessarily. It actually confined it to primary education.
Okay.
That decision, yeah.
Okay. All right. Very good. Then let's turn our attention here and our viewers' attention to the actual implementation of DACA. I understand there are many eligibility requirements, and I'd kind of like to take our time with each one of them so that we have a better understanding about what all of this means. Sure. So age is one eligibility requirement for the application for DACA status, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
You have to be 15 years old to apply for DACA, or if you're in removal proceedings, well, when the program existed, right? Because this is all caveated with the fact that it was rescinded on the 5th of September. But when it was in place, you had to be 15 years old, or if you were younger but you were in removal or deportation proceedings, you could apply before 15. You also have to have entered the United States before your 16th birthday. And then there was a rule that seems somewhat tangential, but is actually in a lot of the Dreamer proposed legislation, what they call an age cap. You couldn't have been over 30 when the program was announced.
All right. Okay. So there's a little bit of a complication. There are several different requirements there with age that people have to be sure to meet when they're making that application. Let's also turn to the requirement about residency. What is that requirement?
You had to have lived in the United States continuously, which generally means no trips lasting longer than 90 days, since June 15th, 2007.
All right.
That's the residency requirement.
All right. And so people could not have come and gone from the United States during that time period. So just to be here continuously.
Right.
Okay. All
so
right.
if somebody had left to go live in another country for a year or something,
they would be disqualified from
yeah.
that. Okay, good. Thank you very much. And then the status. I mean, maybe this is obvious, but people can't have any other status.
Right. So you basically have to have no ability that you're pursuing now or you're aware of to achieve or to qualify for formal immigration status. And that's a really good point about DACA, which is that it is simply a relief from deportation. It's a deferred action. It's not a visa. It's not a path to citizenship or a green card. So people who are on that path already would not qualify for DACA.
Okay. All right. That's an important distinction. And then what about the eligibility of education? Let's talk about that.
Sure. So there are a few ways you can meet the eligibility requirements for the the eligibility for the education requirement. You can either currently be enrolled in school, which could be high school. If you're going to be 15 or older, it's going to probably be high school, or higher education.
Okay.
Or you could be in a GED program. Some English language programs will qualify you.
All right.
Or you have to have graduated from high school or gotten your GED. And then you also could have been honorably discharged from the military or currently enlisted in the military. Okay. Any of those things would qualify you to meet that requirement.
Okay, very interesting with that. And then last but not least in the eligibility requirement is criminal history.
Yes, this gets talked about a lot. So there are certain criminal bars to getting DACA. First of all, you can't have been convicted of a felony. But you also can't have been convicted of what they call a significant misdemeanor. And that can mean a lot of things. It can be serious drug crimes. It can be a DUI, crimes of violence like domestic violence. And you also can't have 3 or more misdemeanor convictions of any type. So there are very heavy criminal or restrictions on what criminal convictions someone could have. It's virtually impossible to get DACA with a criminal record.
I understand. And the application process itself goes through which agency?
It goes through, excuse me, USCIS, which stands for U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. It's a sub-branch of the Department of Homeland Security, and it's the branch that's really charged with approving certain visa applications, green card applications, and citizenship applications.
Okay. And what type of documentation is required to meet all of the eligibility criteria that we just talked about? And I'll stop there and let you answer one piece at a time.
Sure. So first of all, you have to fill out forms because it's immigration, so there are always forms to fill out. There's a Form I-821D, and that's the application for deferred action. You also, with deferred action, with DACA, you get a work permit that's for 2 years, the pendency of the deferred action. So there's a form you have to fill out with that. You have to send in a fee. When DACA was rescinded, it was for $495, and that's virtually non-negotiable. It's very difficult to get a waiver for that. And then as far as documentation to show that you qualify, if you have any arrests, for example, you would have to send certified court dispositions showing that, what the issue was and how it was resolved. You have to show paperwork from the school showing you're enrolled in school, or a diploma, or a GED certificate. So, and then you have to show different types of documentation showing you were here since June 15th of 2007. It can be school records, doctor's records, leases, you name it, we've pieced it together.
Okay. It sounds like that documentation is really fairly extensive and fairly heavy.
Yes.
That goes with this application, and in and of itself could be a challenge for people to get residence records from all of the length of years that they have been there. Yeah. When was the application process first opened up?
I believe they started accepting applications around December of 2012.
Okay.
And so a lot of the first, I believe that's true, and a lot of the first applications were sort of adjudicated in that January, a little bit around there.
Okay. And was there an immediate and swift response by individuals in order to make an application for this program?
There was, to an extent. There was also a lot of fear because essentially people are coming out of the shadows and stating that they are undocumented and they're applying for this, form of deferred action. So, I mean, Stephanie, you could probably speak to this too, but in the communities there was a lot of reticence about coming forward and hesitation. So it actually took some education coaxing almost to get people to apply at first.
Yeah, and to this day, 1.3, I believe, million were eligible for DACA, and only 800,000 applied.
Okay.
So a lot of people had a lot of fears, and even some lawyers said, "Don't do it."
I see. Yeah. I see. Even though the action was deferred, any deportation action would be deferred for 2 years, and as a part of the application, there's the ability to work. So those were pretty strong incentives, I would think. But yet, many people decided that it wasn't for them. It wasn't what they wanted to do.
The fear, I think, was what happens after. If it, like right now, if it gets rescinded, what's the government going to do with that information?
And we'll come back and see what is known about that, because actually, from what we've discussed already, there's a heavy amount of personal information that has been supplied to these services to make this application. I started off the program by mentioning the statement by Attorney General Sessions about the action to suspend. Now, this means that, of course, no new applications were accepted after that date. What does it mean for the people who are within the 2-year framework and have those 2 years?
Well, what he has said is that what the president has said is that anyone whose deferred action and work permit would expire before March of 2018 was eligible, they would accept their applications to renew so long as those renewal applications were submitted before October 5th of 2017.
Okay.
So we had a clinic, and a lot of people came to us whose applications, whose work permits and deferred action expired after that date, because as Stephanie mentioned, there are almost 800,000 people with this benefit,
right.
And they're in limbo. They don't know what's going to happen.
Okay, so they have submitted renewals and no one knows.
The government at this point won't take their applications for
Okay.
renewal.
Won't accept that at
Right.
all. Before it was suspended, there was a cost for the renewal of the application, I would think, as well.
Yes.
Okay, but since it's been suspended, it's just frozen, right?
Right. So if you're deferred action, they made a cutoff point, basically 6 months after they made the announcement, March 5th, 2018. So everybody who was eligible to renew before that date, whose deferred action would expire before that date, was eligible to renew. The people whose work permits happened to expire March 6th and later, they are not eligible to renew at this time, and they don't know what's going to happen. And those renewal applications that were submitted do have the $495 fee as well.
They do, okay. And is it your experience or your knowledge that some of those have been processed? Or is it, has there not been enough time?
They haven't been approved yet
Okay.
because it's a process that takes several months.
Right.
But they are in process.
Okay, all right. And can people check that status as those that are waiting on green cards? There's a site where you can go and it just says in process?
Yeah.
Okay,
basically.
all right.
Yes.
It's not a whole lot of information,
No.
but at least it does, not a big, large denied up there. You
Right.
know, that's
Right.
that's the good part then. What is known really about the impact of DACA as far as the whole work relationship? Have we seen? Are the majority of people with this, they're working, they're getting jobs and they're working, and I would assume that's benefiting their families and their communities. What kind of, do you know of research that's been done? Can you enlighten us a little bit about that?
Sure. I can share some numbers with you, and I think Stephanie could speak more to the human side of it.
Sure.
The Center for American Progress issued a report that states that an estimated 87% of DACA recipients are working. So there are many who are in school,
Sure.
and there's probably some overlap, people who are in school and working. But out of the, approximately 750,000 people who are, documented, we call them, who are DACA recipients, 645,000 approximately are in the workforce. And what's interesting about that, other than that's an extremely high percentage, is that if DACA continues to be rescinded and people are no longer allowed to renew, and there's no legislative action taken to grant people status to be able to keep working, that's estimated that there will be turnover costs because 600 and something thousand people will be losing their jobs, and that will cost businesses $3.4 billion in recruiting new people, and the costs that it costs business owners to replace staff.
Okay. Can you speak a little bit to the impact that this ability to work makes on the household?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So statistically, we've seen that people who received DACA status, or that became documented, we saw a very positive impact in the community, economically, educationally. You had individuals who now were able to obtain jobs that offered them higher wages, and now were able to support their family. So they got out of poverty, or they helped their family out of poverty. And then you have those individuals that bought a car for the first time, that bought a home for the first time, that started a business. 7.9% of DACA recipients started a business.
That's very significant.
So that opens up work opportunities for other people as well. So I think that those were the impacts economically in regards to DACA status.
Okay. And what about the emotional impact on the individual and the family to recognize that one is free from deportation action for at least a time period?
Okay. So aside from being able to go further economically, educationally, this was a point in a DACA recipient's life where things changed. So I want to talk a little bit about this term called transition to illegality. We talked about it in one of my courses at Wright State University. And it's a term that was created by a psychologist named Roberto Gonzalez at UCLA. And a lot of the experiences that DACA students have, or DACA recipients, dreamers, is that they don't know that they're undocumented until they reach a point in their lives where all their friends are getting driver's licenses, all their friends are applying to college, and they can't do it because they don't have the documents necessary to do it. So that's when they're like, holy cow, I'm undocumented. And all that ambition, all that motivation that they had narrows or diminishes completely. So you have these individuals who now, because of the benefits that came along with DACA, felt that now they could, for the first time, plan their future. So you have these people who were excited about what the future had in hold for them, and for a small period in their lives, they lost that mental damage that fear and stress of deportation caused. And now all of that is back. So I think it's imperative for us to take into consideration their emotions and how they're feeling and reach out to them and ask them if they need mental resources. Why? Because now they're lost, they're scared, and they don't know what's going to happen next.
Right. Good. Thank you for sharing that. That's really important for people, I think, to understand that kind of a roller coaster of learning that you're not going to have the driver's license and then being able to go and even start your own business. Where are most of the dreamers living in the country? Are there like the top 3 or 4 or 5 states where individuals who have applied for this benefit are living? Do we know?
Mm-hmm. California.
Okay.
California and Texas are
California
the big two.
And Texas.
Yeah, the two states hold the vast majority of DACA recipients, hundreds of thousands of
hundreds
people.
of thousands. Okay, so it's very common. Do we know what number we have in Ohio?
Yeah, we have approximately, according to USCIS, there are approximately 4,000 DACA recipients living in Ohio.
4,000 in our entire state.
Right.
Okay. And so Montgomery County is one of the more populous areas, but do they break it down by county, or do we know?
I have seen estimates. I think that Columbus, Franklin County area, they certainly have the most.
Okay.
And then, I'm not sure how many we have. I think we might have a few hundred, but we're not breaking 1,000 here.
Right. Well, if there are 4,000 in the entire state,
Yes.
but yeah, it's not a huge number here. Not that each individual is not important. They're all very important. But
Yes.
Can we talk a little bit about now that this has been suspended, and you've already mentioned the unknown that it has put people into. Is there a concerted action by individuals who are DACA recipients? Is there a goal that they would like to see? I'll let you all answer that. And there may be several. I mean, a group this large is not going to all think the same. Everybody is going to have their own opinion.
So there's an organization. It's called, I lost it. I had it in my head.
United We Dream?
United We Dream.
Okay.
And they are the largest immigration youth group organization created here in the United States. And they had a statement, and they kind of represent a lot of the DACA recipients, and it says that we would like a DREAM Act that allows young immigrants to be protected, to be able to work, to be able to go to school, pay taxes, to live without fear, absolutely no wall, and no detaining or deporting immigrants. So that's their goal. Okay. That's their overall goal to obtain here in the United States, I think.
Okay. All right.
In summary.
All right. That's very understandable. And what do we really think is going to happen next? And here's where we have our crystal ball. I mean, because news changes things almost every day. So.
Well, there are a couple things in the pipeline. There's a lawsuit challenging the rescission of DACA as a violation of due process. And
where's that coming from?
I believe it's coming from California.
Okay.
And not too many updates on that at this point in time. It's unclear. But the other sort of in the pipeline issue is, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's another DREAM Act bill that is, actually there are two that are in the Senate. One of them is sponsored by Senators Lindsey Graham and Dick Durbin, and it is more of a reiteration of some of the DREAM Acts we've seen before.
Okay.
And today was actually sort of an interesting day because President Trump issued a set of policies that he wants to see attached to any DREAM Act legislation.
Right. We will come right back to that. I'm being told that we have a caller that has a question.
Great.
Yes, caller, thank you for calling the program. You're on the air, and we'd like to hear your question.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. This is a wonderful program. I've already learned a lot on a very important subject, especially in my neighborhood. My question is this, and I apologize if I missed something that you said about it earlier, but I hear lots of criticism from the current administration in Washington about something called chain migration, and I don't exactly know what that is. It seems like it's related to families coming here, and there is a desire then to move away from that toward some sort of merit-based system. And if we did that, if we moved to a merit-based system, what effect would that have on families?
Thank you very much for that good question. We're going to get you an answer here as best we can. Thank you for your call. All right, chain migration is kind of basically what the caller was saying that he did not know about, and neither do I, quite honestly. I don't think I've ever heard the term until tonight. So bring us up to date on what this is.
Sure. Well, that was an extremely astute observation that he made. It is this notion of family migration. Right now, our immigration laws are set up primarily as a family-based system. So someone comes here, they get a permanent residency, they can apply for their spouse and their children, they become a citizen, they can apply for their parents, their siblings, and their children. I will caveat that by saying there are extremely long wait times, and not every family member you can't apply for every single family member you have, so some people just get left out. So that's what chain migration ultimately is.
And that's been going for quite some time,
right,
historically.
Since
There's a long history of this.
Right,
okay.
Right. And actually, the lines are so long that people could wait 30, 40 years before they would ever actually get a visa in their hand in certain categories. So it's not a very effective system as it is now. What he mentioned about switching to the merit-based system, I believe his specific question is, what effect would it have on families? One of the proponents that the administration has specifically proposed, or one of the things they've proposed, is to, for example, make it so that U.S. citizens couldn't petition for their parents, so that people who are here with a green card would be limited, maybe not able to petition for their children. And so it would really separate families even more so than we have now with the long wait times. So that's a very, very serious change to consider, and the effect that it would have on people who are American citizens, who would no longer be able to bring their families here to live with them.
Okay. And then how does one define meritorious in this kind of scheme?
Well, there are different ways, different countries. Some countries do have merit-based systems.
Yes.
It's not a uniquely American idea. And so different people have defined it in different ways, or different countries have. It's essentially where there's a point system, and you would get so many points for graduating from American university, or so many points for being fluent in English, so many points for, you name it, being sponsored by a business. And you have to have there's a certain threshold of points that you would have to score to get to come to the United States, basically. there are several problems with that, one of which is it just doesn't take a look at the whole well-rounded person. It doesn't see who we need. It would eliminate, those proposals eliminate the diversity visas, which keep people coming from all around the world and keep us being such a melting pot that we are in the United States. So we would lose a lot of the diversity and the family nature of our immigration system if we did adopt that.
Okay, good. Well, thank you very much. Did you have anything to add about on that particular topic?
I just shook my head because I completely agree with what Katie is saying, which is we would lose the diversity, and it doesn't look at the person as a whole.
Okay.
So that's kind of why I shook my head, like, no, it will not work.
But as it is now, that system is not really working that effectively anyway because of the lengthy wait times.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Either way, it looks like we've got some problems with that. Well, thank you to the caller then. We were kind of into what happens next, and you were saying that a list had been released today. So, I mean, it seems like that with this suspension of DACA, now it seems like there's a speeding up of attention to this process right now because of that 6-month window, and an attempt to get action from Congress on all of that. So, tell us a little bit about what they did today, or what you wanted to comment on for today.
Well, and feel free to chime in, but basically, the administration released a set of policies. So, what's important about that they would like to see in any legislation. Of course, the president does not pass laws, so these are more like suggestions or things that he would like to see in the sort of bargaining and conference process. And those include, there are a lot of them, but some of the ones I can remember off the top of my head, implementation of E-Verify, which would be checking immigration status through a certain federal mechanism of every person. One of the downsides to E-Verify, of course, is it's very expensive, so it puts a huge strain on smaller businesses especially. He wants to limit family migration, and I believe he uses the term chain migration in the policy. Increased detention, so incarceration of people coming here fearing for their lives, fearing persecution in other countries while they're in the court process. What else am I thinking?
It was a list.
Oh, the
from
wall.
what
Okay.
I
The
read.
wall.
So
okay.
yes, you have
All
to.
right. All right.
It was like a list of 70 different points.
I see.
And one of them was the wall, cut legal immigration by tightening standards of asylum protection, which is a lot of the work that ABLE does.
Okay.
Also, the staffing of ICE, so doing that even more, so beefing
Increasing
up that,
staffing,
increasing the
right.
staffing, and then cracking down on sanctuary cities.
Yes, that was a big one, is
So-
eliminating federal grant programs to cities that don't honor ICE detainers,
Right,
which is a
right.
whole other
Yes.
show.
Yes, it is. I think so. Although you might want to just briefly define that for individuals who don't understand what that
Sure.
is.
ICE detainers are when someone is placed into the jail because they've been arrested. It could be for driving without a license. It could be for a serious crime.
Right.
That person's fingerprints are run through. They do, the first thing they do is they book them, right? They take their fingerprints. Those fingerprints have always been run through local and state and national, federal databases. Now, through what's called the program that's called Secure Communities, which is a federal program, the fingerprints are also sent to immigration, and they're run through an immigration database to check that person's immigration status. ICE, which is the agency in charge of interior immigration enforcement, then has the option to place a detainer request on an individual who's held in a jail, and those detainers extend for 48 hours after their pendency of their criminal case. So after they're able to go because their criminal case has been resolved, whether they've been found innocent or they've posted bond or whatever, they've been served their time. 48 hours after that, ICE has the opportunity to come in and get them, pick them up, and take them to immigration detention. The issue with that, so there's a lot of division as to whether or not those detainers should be followed, whether or not jails should honor them, or whether or not they should just release people when their criminal case is over. The people who are not in favor of honoring detainers say it's a request. It's not a mandatory detainer like another criminal detainer would be. Like if I commit a crime in Indiana and I get arrested in Ohio, after Ohio's done with me, Ohio they're required to keep me there until Indiana comes to get me. it's not required like that with immigration. The other issue is anytime you detain someone, you need to have probable cause. And the Constitution requires you to have a reason to do that. And you need to have probable cause determined by a judge. And ICE is not a judicial agency; they don't have judges, so there's no probable cause determination. So there's a lot of controversy around that. To get to your specific point, the list that the Trump administration released would specifically state that agencies, jails essentially, who don't honor immigration detainers would have, those cities or those counties would have their federal grant monies taken away. So that's obviously a big deal because a lot of localities rely on federal funding for crucial programs.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like each piece of all of this has its own huge set of controversies. I mean, each tiny item with this, which is why the next 6 months are going to be very interesting, and a lot of news and all of that going on with that, and a lot of considerations and hopefully some negotiations. But what are, in your experience, what are most of the dreamers who now this has been suspended, and some may have gotten in an application that's pending for extension, but it's been suspended? What kind of plans are people making in response to this? Because it's been a month, and of course there's shock initially. There's absolute shock, and then people have to think, okay, what am I going to do next if this is what happens? If nothing changes, how are people responding to that?
Dreamers by nature are fighters.
Okay.
So they fight, and they are here to stay. That's what they say, and I firmly believe that. They are mobilizing. They are mobilizing locally. They are figuring out ways to be able to empower the immigrant youth, to be able to let them know that there are mental resources out for you, but we have to keep this going. We have to call congressmen. We have to tweet. We have to make this social media.
Right.
We have to be able to be there with our community and come together with each other and be able to fight for one another. And that's what they're doing. So a lot of them are going to Twitter to tweet their congressman, hey, this is what I believe you should be able to support, co-sponsor, sponsor, whatever it is that congressman could potentially do. And then you can call them. On United We Dream, they have templates where these individuals, dreamers, or even just allies to dreamers, can call their congressman, and they already have a template there for you that you can read. And just call your congressman, and if I'm nervous and if I'm stuttering, I don't have to stutter. I have a template.
Right.
So that is what they're doing. They're mobilizing, and a lot of them are coming together. There's 3 that I know personally from Ohio, from Cincinnati, who have already gone down to Washington, D.C. to speak to congressmen about their stories and why they believe they deserve a second chance.
Okay.
So.
Well, political action is hard enough when a group has the vote, and then even more challenging when they don't have that. So that's very interesting to hear about those topics. And so they're fighters, and so they're not planning to put their businesses that they've started in other people's names, or they're not kind of making those kind of strategies at this point, or do you know?
Well, I wouldn't know if there's statistics on that, but I bet that there are people who are looking at different options on how to continue to live a good life.
Yes, good. And then what are the advocates faced with the situation that they have now? What steps are you all trying to take to assist?
Well, ABLE, or Advocates for Basic Legal Equality, we are a nonprofit law firm, and we primarily serve low-income individuals. So, and we provide most of our services are pro bono. So what we're doing, and what a lot of advocates in Ohio are doing, is first of all educating the communities. There's for a lot of reasons, there are a lot of rumors that go around. For everything that happens that actually happens in Washington, there are like 10 rumors of things that are going on that are not true. So we're doing a lot of outreach. We're going to churches, we're holding events at schools and other things to educate people both in the immigrant community and in what we call the receiving community about what's happening. On top of that, we're providing free immigration clinics where people can come. When we did have, before the October 5th, we were helping people with their renewals because many people can't afford, they have to pay the $495, and sometimes attorneys can charge, $1,000, $1,500, and that's just impossible for some people. So ABLE was providing these clinics to help people renew. their application. And then we also have regular screening clinics where we meet with people to make sure that there's no form of permanent status that they do qualify for, or to help connect them, people who do think they have a type of status they can qualify for, with attorneys who will be able to meet their needs.
Right. Considering that the status was such a big issue for, a big eligibility requirement for application, I would imagine that there are probably rather few that actually do have some other status option, right? Or are you not dealing with dreamers in that population?
That's a good point. I mean, a lot of dreamers don't have any other options, although some of them will get married to a U.S. citizen and might be able to adjust their status that way. Some people, unfortunately, become victims of crime, and if they cooperate with law enforcement, there are sometimes visas that are available to them through their cooperation with law enforcement in an investigation. So sometimes,
but that's not the way we want people to do it.
Right. That is not the
that's
ideal.
That's not a good option, yeah.
But we also, for like every dreamer that will come, we'll get 2 or 3 family members, maybe a mom, who's like, what do I do? You know, they're all panicking right now. It's not just the rescission of DACA, but the general increased immigration enforcement. So we try to be open to the family unit because, you know, for us, immigration is about keeping families together.
Yeah, okay, very good. And from the communication, you mentioned Twitter directed toward Congress and toward elected officials. Are there really good networks among the Dreamer community for exchanging information? Are those well developed? Yes. Okay.
There's multiple places that you can look.
That's good.
So there's United We Dream on Twitter. There's Undocumedia on Twitter and Facebook.
Okay.
And they're all dedicated for undocumented immigrants to look at their resources and be able to spread the word.
That's good.
And come as a community, come together as a community.
Would you also suggest those for people in the general community who want more information, or are there other resources that you would direct people to? A viewer that perhaps watches this tonight or when it is shown again during the course of the next month, where else are there top sites where people can go to find out what's up to date and good quality reporting on it? Got some
My favorite one is United We Dream.
Okay, United We Dream.
United We Dream. Because it is the largest immigrant youth-led organization in the country, and they know what they want, and they know what they're doing.
That's good. We have another caller, so I'm going to come back to that thought. Yes, thank you for calling the program. We'd love to hear your question. You're on the air.
Yes, hello. I just want to say how much I'm enjoying this program. It's been wonderful. I've learned so much. I just have a couple questions about who are the local groups that are organizing locally that I can become involved with to lend my support to the Dreamers? That's my first question. And what is the phone number, or who can I call to get a speaker to come to my church and talk about this issue?
Thank you very much. That brings it right here to our community, and we'll get you some resources on that. Thank you for your call. Okay, you heard what are the local groups? What can she participate in to learn more locally, and what's a phone number to obtain a speaker?
Let's see. We the local groups there. Well, you all are working on a response, right, through Latinos Unidos. Is that right?
Yes.
What is the
So
name
there's
of that group?
LULAC.
Well, yeah.
There's LULAC. So League of United Latin American Citizens.
League of United Latin American Citizens.
Yes.
Okay.
And we have a council in Dayton, Cincinnati. Dayton, since we're doing local.
Okay. So the League of United Latin Americans could be found. That could be Googled, and they'll find they'll find that, and they'll get the local number here. Okay.
And then you mentioned Latinos Unidos through Right State.
No, what's the group that you're a part of that's doing the response?
The Voces Unidas. United Voices.
United Voices.
Which is part of Latinos Unidos, right? No?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think you're right. So there is Voices United.
Voices United.
Yes.
Okay.
And you can't Google that because it's one of those types of organizations that are...
It's not that organized yet.
We're in the process of being able to help the community. So if she wants to help out, she's more than welcome to become part of the process.
Okay, all right. And she would, can we perhaps post at my office tomorrow some more contact information that you can
Yes.
get to me. Okay, I would invite the viewer there to also contact the Ombudsman's office tomorrow, and we can get some more details about phone numbers and websites for you. So we're at 223-4613. Thank you very much. Okay, and
Speaker.
yes, a speaker. She was interested in a speaker for her church group to come. Okay.
Yeah, probably either Voces, is it Voces Unidos? Voces Latinos.
Voces Unidas.
Unidas. Or ABLE might also be able to provide a speaker as well. So I don't know if we wanted to put the call-in information on your website, or you want me to give the number now? Or?
You can give the number now, it'd be
Okay.
great. And then we can also follow up and have it available for people who are looking later, in case somebody doesn't have a pencil where they are at the
Sure,
moment.
right.
But give it anyway.
I
so.
think the best way to get an ABLE speaker, someone from Advocates for Basic Legal Equality, because as I mentioned, we do a lot of outreach that's a focus, education, would be to call our outreach paralegal, Alejandra Espino. Her phone number is 937-535-4402. Just explain that you heard the show and that you're interested in having a speaker, and we will work as best as we can to get somebody to your group.
Okay. That sounds great, and I hope the invitations will be coming so that people can learn and participate even more. Any other resources that people should know about?
There is a group called Ohio's Voice.
Okay.
That is a statewide organization. They do a lot of work on Facebook through social media. So, of course, what's different now, right, is everybody's on
Yes.
Twitter and everybody's on Facebook.
That's
so
right, yeah.
the mobilization efforts, you can be involved and not actually physically leave your house.
Right, right.
And so I would encourage people to friend on Facebook Ohio's Voice.
Ohio's Voice, got it. Okay, that's good.
Another one is Welcome Dayton, of course, is an immigrant-friendly city initiative at the city of Dayton.
Right.
And they do have some resources there. And then another group that is starting to do, there are a couple other groups that are more allies. So somebody who may not identify as a dreamer or a member of the immigrant community but wants to help and doesn't really know where to start. There's a group out of Cincinnati that does work in Dayton called the Amos Project. And they're a faith-based organization, but they don't, it's not required that you're a member of their faith to do that work. But they do a lot of protests and marches and vigils and sort of more of the activism. And then the last one is called SURGE. It stands for Showing Up for Racial Justice, and they have a chapter in Dayton. And it's primarily for people who I would say it's for people who might consider themselves to be outside of the community that we're talking about, but really want to be allies and stand up and find out how to act.
Okay, and so Amos Project and Surge and Welcome Dayton and would all have websites, and Ohio's Voice is primarily reachable through Facebook. So Surge is on Facebook too. Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know. So there's really a lot of resources where people can go, and hopefully she can get herself a speaker for her church, so more people can be educated. I mean, the dreamers themselves know what's going on here, but I think the reason for this program tonight is I think many people don't really know all of the detailed information that you've been able to share and the impact information that you have been able to share. So we don't have a whole lot of time left in this program tonight, so I just wanted to give you a chance to make any comments or say anything that I haven't asked you about. So feel free.
Another great resource is, what is that office out in Columbus?
The Ohio Commission of Hispanic and Latino Affairs.
Yes. So they also keep track of legislation.
Okay.
And if people want to go online and see what's going on in regards to immigration laws, that's where you would find it.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
That's good.
That's very good. So they're going to have a website as well, the
Yes.
Ohio Commission of Latino Affairs. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, good. Got that one out there. Anything else?
Just support your dreamers. See if they're mentally okay, and reach out to them. I know that there is a man who is in charge of an orchestra in Cleveland who offered a free show dinner for dreamers, and that already passed. But things like that would make their day.
All right. Well, that's any kind of support, right?
Yes,
certainly,
definitely.
certainly. Anything else, Katie?
Okay, well, the lawyer in me has 2
Okay,
points,
good.
not just one. First of all, I think it's important, something I haven't really mentioned yet. DACA, both as it was introduced in 2012 and as throughout, until 2017, what it really is an exercise of prosecutorial discretion. Right. So it's this notion, and anyone who's worked for a nonprofit, as I have, or any agency or business, knows that in life we have this much need and this many resources. It's always the case. And so DACA came out of this notion that there are 11, now approximately 12 million undocumented people in the United States, and we simply can't deport all of them. It's just not possible. That's a lot of people. And so we're not going to take our enforcement priority, or what limited enforcement resources we have, and hone in on people who were brought here as children, who by all intents and purposes are essentially Americans. We would instead work on enforcement on people with serious criminal convictions, or people who have done other really terrible things, not the people who are living here peacefully and raising their families. So that's kind of where DACA came from, and I think that's important when you think about legislation and you think about immigration reform and that whole bigger conversation. Is the notion that we just can't deport 12 million people. It's not physically possible. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is, as Stephanie's really talked about, Dreamers are fighters, and they really want nothing more than to be part of the community where they grew up. And in order to be part of that community, to really maintain their businesses, continue to employ workers, many of them American citizens, to continue to contribute to advances in technology and other really necessary fields, they have to have reassurance that they are here to stay. And so what that really means is we really need Congress to act and to pass a law to give Dreamers status here and citizenship so that they can be, officially live out the American dream. And what's interesting about that, the last thing I would say, is that there was a study done by a group called Morning Consult that stated that in April of this year, that stated that 78% of American voters, including 73% of Trump voters, despite the fact that he ran on a sort of an anti-immigrant rhetoric, 73% of those voters and 78% of Americans at large support Dreamers being able to stay. So we need to make the jump from saying, yeah, that's a good thing, yeah, I support them, to actually picking up the phone and calling your congressperson.
Okay, so call to action
yes.
here to get that done. And I think that there will probably be a lot of that coming in the next few months, because as we've talked about tonight, a lot of these different pieces are going to be in the news, and they're going to be aired, and they're going to be discussed, and there is going to be action and response to this for all the reasons that you both have given. So thank you very much. And to our viewers, we will make sure that the information that has been given tonight about additional resources for either speakers or other information gets up on our Facebook, which is Dayton Ombudsman Office, and so that you can find that. Or if you are not using Facebook and you still want more information, you're always welcome to call us at 223-4613. So I want to thank you both for giving your time and your information tonight. It's been very informative, I think, for all concerned, and I'd like to thank the viewers for watching this evening. Good night.